Welcome to Equine Assisted World. I'm your host, Rupert Isaacson, New York Times best-selling author of The Horse Boy, founder of New Trails Learning Systems and LongRideHome.com. You can find details of all our programs and shows on rupertisaacson.com. Here on Equine Assisted World, we look at the cutting edge and the best practices currently being developed and established in the equine assisted field. This can be psychological, this can be psych, this can be physical, this can be all of the conditions that human beings have that these lovely equines, these beautiful horses that we work with, help us with. Thank you for being part of the adventure, and we hope you enjoy today's show. Welcome back to Equine Assisted World. I've got someone amazing. I always have someone amazing. Sheryl Barto. Sheryl Barto runs Smiling Goat Ranch. Should be really ranches in the western slope of Colorado. She's an autism mum. She's been running an extraordinary equestrian assisted, I say equestrian assisted, not equine assisted, because she brings a lot of beautiful classical riding and education to what she does with special needs and also to special horses. She's invested many, many years in acquiring this knowledge, and as a result, does something rather extraordinary, not just for people with autism, but also people with trauma and people who are lost in the world. And she does it in an area of Colorado that a lot of people are less familiar with. Everyone's heard of Aspen. Oh yeah, all these rich people in Aspen. What they don't realize is that it's a whole hinterground on the western slope of very, very ordinary people living out their lives, sort of ranchers, people with jobs and stuff. All of these people end up with special needs kids, and someone's got to serve them. Sheryl Barto is the person who, and has been there for many years. She's not just limited to the horses. She also includes mountain sports. She just includes ranch work, ranch life skills. I'm going to stop babbling, but Sheryl Barto makes me babble because she's so awesome. Okay, so Sheryl, welcome to Equine Assisted World. Would you please tell us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Thank you, Rupert. I am incredibly honored to be here and talking with you today. Wow, that was quite the introduction. And yes, I started Smiling Goat in 2015. As you mentioned, I'm an autism mom, and that's where this journey started. My son, James, is now 30 years old, and we didn't get a diagnosis until he was 10, but we knew something was up during those first 10 years. And gosh, I grew up really wanting to be a horse trainer. And that's what I wanted to do when I went to college. And I am the product of a divorced family. And my mom was a single mom. My dad was still very much in my life. He was a veterinarian. But my mom said, "You absolutely are not going to college to be a horse trainer." And I ended up getting a degree in journalism and pursuing a career in public relations. And gosh, for probably 25 years, I had no horses in my life. I grew up showing POAs from like age 12 through 18. And then I was on the riding team in college.
What's a POA for we Brits out there?
Pony of America.
Hey,
Yeah.
those thing, right? Yeah.
They are mini Appaloosas.
Okay.
So they're under 14 two hands. So they're technically ponies, but they have brains more like horses. So they're smaller.
They're not evil.
Right. They're not evil. No, they're really, really sweet. And my journey, my POA, my pony was named Tomahawks Supreme, and I called him Supreme. And I really grew up with him. Like, those were the days, of course, with no cell phones or I would say to my mom, I'm going out for a trail ride. I would take Supreme and the dog, and I would be gone for 8 hours. And
Where
I
was
would
this? Which part of the US was this?
in Pennsylvania, in between Reading and Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So lots of farm country. My dad had started out being a large and small animal vet. So many of the farms I had already visited because he was doing farm calls and pregnancy checks on dairy cattle. And I would just ride by myself. And, being a product of a divorced family, there's lots of stuff you go through. And that pony, I feel like, saved my mental health going through, the teenage years of having divorced parents and remarriages and step brothers and sisters and all that good stuff that now seems very common. When I left college with my journalism degree, I had done an internship in PR for IBM at a federal systems division in New York State. And I really thought, okay, I'm going to be a corporate PR person and I'm going to get a job in a corporation doing PR because I loved my internship and I had learned so much in the 6 months that I was there. At the same time, I still had a relationship going with my high school sweetheart, and he was in the Coast Guard and stationed in Hawaii and then in New England. And we always had this dream of going to Colorado. And I think, Colorado had this magnetic allure of we were both skiers, wanted to be in the mountains. And my first job ended up not being with a corporation, but being with a local government association in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which is the capital of the state and pretty city-like, which was really not my jam. But I was hired to work on a local government magazine that represented the whole state. So I was reporter, photographer, etc. And in the meantime, two of my high school friends went to Aspen, Colorado after they graduated just to have fun. And I went out to visit them because we all shared this love of skiing. And I thought, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I'm 22 years old. I'm quitting my job and I'm moving to Aspen, which is what I did. And I became a ski bum for a season, thinking I would go back to the real world. And I ended up then getting a job in PR with the Aspen Skiing Company. So I stayed the summer. And once you experience the summer in Colorado, they always say you come for the winter, you stay for the summers. And this is a lot of people's stories here in
Why is that?
the summer is incredibly magical. The weather is spectacular. It's almost perfection. There's sunny days, everybody's out hiking or mountain biking, and the ski areas have turned summer tourism into this incredible attraction. And honestly, in Aspen on July 4th, they do an Old Town parade, and it is more crowded on July 4th in Aspen than any day during the wintertime. There's a lot of magic to it. Yeah. And so I ended up marrying my high school sweetheart, and we had two sons. And the oldest son, James, is our kiddo on the autism spectrum, and he's very high functioning. We got the diagnosis when he was 10. And as I mentioned earlier, we didn't know what was going on age 2 through 10, but we knew something was going on. And I had gone to specialist after specialist. We are 3 hours from Denver. We had seen 3 different doctors in Denver, and people would say, gosh, this is a puzzle. Is it ADD? Is it ADHD? And I would say, yeah, I see pieces and parts of that, but I don't think that that's it. And then crazily, and I don't think I've ever shared this story with you, in my PR world, I represented import beer companies for 15 years. And it was a really fun gig, which meant that I took US journalists to breweries throughout Europe. So Germany, the Czech Republic, Ireland, even Thailand. And one of these trips, I had a female editor, and it was a magazine. I don't even remember the name of it anymore, but it was one of those like Maxim magazines and a female editor. And I was like, really? I always thought men would be the editors of those magazines. But she and I are still in touch to this day. And she told me this story of her sister being diagnosed with autism. And we were on a bus going from a brewery to town to tour. And I got home and I started researching autism. And I spent a weekend like just getting sucked in and realizing this was it. And calling my dad, the veterinarian, and saying, I think we figured this out. And at the time, Children's Hospital Colorado had an 8-month waiting list you have to, in Colorado, have a psychiatrist make your diagnosis. And so 8 months later, we went to Children's and they said, you have a textbook case, a son with autism. And there were such emotions around that of relief of knowing what we were dealing with, to sadness, to, oh my gosh, like I don't have a neurotypical kid. And being in a small town, we were the only people. James actually ended up being the first person from his high school graduating with autism. And so I took the path of owning it and telling everyone and educating people. When we got the diagnosis, he was going from elementary school into middle school. And I called the principal of the middle school and I said, this is what I just learned. And he said, will you come in and do a presentation to the whole teaching team? And so I came in, did a presentation to the whole 5th grade teaching team. And it was amazing how they opened their arms and welcomed James and really made accommodations for him to get through middle school. And then we get into high school and it's a completely different ballgame. Different, well, he has to advocate for himself and he needs to do X, Y, and Z. And it was, for me as a parent, a huge struggle, and dealing with bullying, dealing with being ostracized, and not like it. One of the gifts of autism, there are so many, which I learned through you and the horseboy method, is not really caring what other people think. And, I'm seeing where he's not getting invited to the graduation parties or any parties for that matter. And he's blissfully happy with his world of, us having a dog. And that dog was his lifeline. His, looking back on all of this and not realizing how much the dog was his lifeline until I went through the horseboy method and understanding that animal connection with humans and special needs folks. So, gosh, then, yeah, my PR career is going parallel with all this whole journey. And my career has really taken off and my business is doing really, really well. And I end up going through a divorce because I was the breadwinner. And it was a lot. It was a lot being the breadwinner and a special needs mom. And frankly, I look back on that era and say to myself, you should have still made room for horses, but I felt like I couldn't financially or time-wise. And then when James was 15, this local autism group said to me, let's have him come to our camp for this session. And that was when my son learned that he had autism, not until he was 15. He didn't even realize, and it didn't matter to him. He was very happy in his own world. And when they had so graciously offered to allow him to be part of the camp, I said, well, how can I give back to you? And that's when I offered to do the pro bono work for them. And they were a growing organization. I think they are now in their 20th year.
What's the name of the organization?
It's called a Syndigo. And at the time, it was called Extreme Sports Camp. And that had a lot of mixed messages in the marketplace, especially in a ski town where there's actually like extreme ski sports. But the idea of their organization is to actually teach people on the autism spectrum skills to do sports. So they were doing rock climbing, they were doing horseback riding, and they were doing water sports. So wakeboarding. And it was really cool. They had video footage of my son, who we had gone with friends to Lake Powell with, of course, all my friends' kids are neurotypical kids, and their kids are doing flips on the wakeboards and one arms and going sideways, and James could never do that. And he gets to this camp and he's the star on the wakeboard because he had seen what some of the other kids had done, and he did what he could do to his level. And like the photos of him and the grin on his face of the accomplishments that he had at this camp were absolutely priceless. So then they, as an organization, evolved into wanting to do big gala fundraiser. And that's when they decided they were going to bring in celebrity autism parents. And they brought in Holly Robinson Pete, who is the star of 21 Jump Street, and her husband is an ex-NFL football player, Rodney Beebe. And then they brought in Rupert Isaacson, the founder of the Horse Boy. And I remember thinking, how can I have been a horse-obsessed person and have never heard of the Horse Boy book or movie, and I have a son with autism? And my conclusion to that was, well, I was a single mom running a business, raised a kid with special needs. And so when I witnessed your demonstration of the Horseboy method on a horse you had never met, in a place you had never been to, and how you were teaching geography and math from the back of a horse, I was moved to tears. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is my calling. And this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I think, Rupert, that was 2012. So I had no horses, no infrastructure, no nothing other than a PR firm and a new husband and I came home and I said, how do you feel about having horses in our lives? And he had grown up in Wyoming on a ranch and he had 2 kids. And he said, I'm open to it. So we had a small property. Well, I should back up because I want to talk a little bit about the Horseboy karma that I think has followed me completely on this journey. So James graduates high school and he's seeing all of his friends go off to college. And James absolutely was not college material, nor did he want to go to college. So I had researched a life skills school, Like, where could he go to learn some more life skills? So I had found one in Arizona. And at the time, because I didn't have enough to do, I was the volunteer journalism teacher at their local high school because I didn't like the newspaper and I thought it could be so much better. And it was a way for me to get back to the high school. I did not want to be on boosters. I did not want to be in any sort of politics. And I was like, why don't I try teaching this class? So I'm teaching this class. I did it for the 3 years both my boys were in the high school. And a journalism fellowship came across my desk after you had been to Aspen for this event, and you could apply for 2 weeks to enhance your skills as a high school journalism teacher. So I was like, oh my gosh, University or Arizona State was on the list. And I thought, I'll apply there. I will go. Then I can be down there with James while he's attending life skills school. And then I get a rejection letter from Arizona, but they said, we're happy to host you at University of Texas in Austin. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. Isn't that where Rupert's whole program is based? Well, maybe I should go visit while I'm down there and see if this is the real deal and see if it is what I think it is. And so I end up going to Austin, and in my 2 weeks, we had a free weekend, and I went out to visit Horseboy headquarters, which at the time was in Elgin, Texas. And I don't know if you remember this visit, Rupert, but I met Betsy, the foundation horse. And I also remember really having this fear, even though I was an autism mom, of other people's kids with autism. Like, would I be able to handle them? Would I know what to do? Would I be worthy? Could I really help them? Like, it was weird that I was having this awesome experience teaching kids at the high school, but they're all neurotypical kids. I have this autistic son, and then I come to your ranch in Elgin, and I remember this family from Mexico being there, and they had 3 kids. You were working with the entire family, and their little boy was severely autistic. And watching him with the horses, and you somehow had me jump in while you were doing this session. And this little boy turns around and gives me the most giant hug. And he was nonverbal. And I thought, okay, I get it. I think I can do this. And that's when I started your training program. And I think you ended up coming to Colorado Springs, which is a 3.5 hour drive for us, to teach the Horseboy 1 course. And I came in to do that also with some fears around my ancient horse skills that were sort of dormant. And how was I going to be? How was I going to do this? And I think the other beautiful thing about the Horseboy method and the approach and the welcoming by the whole tribe was we actually can find a role for anybody who has the heart to do this. And even if you have a challenge rising to certain pieces and parts, we will help you get there. And then I remember, I think the other piece I was so incredibly attracted to, because remember, I wanted to be the horse trainer, was that horse skills were important to training the Horseboy horse. And so I was like, wow, okay, now I get to kind of brush up on this. And that was the attraction for me to come back to Elgin and start learning dressage, which I knew zero about dressage. I grew up in the POA world with no lessons, I was on that riding team in college that we had a coach that was like, yep, you guys look good. And so the dressage piece was extraordinarily intimidating, but at the same time, I was so fascinated because I'm also, in addition to being a skier and a trail runner, very much when I was 35, started doing yoga. And I still marvel at now, after whatever it's been, 25, 30 years of doing yoga, how much similarity there is between yoga fitness for the human and dressage fitness for the horse. And looking at classical dressage and how it helps build the right muscles for the horse to be able to do their job and carry two riders. And there is just so much synergy between the two. It blows my mind weekly. And so I remember also spending that week with you, learning just how to hold a dressage whip and my arms and my hands being sore. And I'm thinking, okay, I thought I was an athlete. I've been this skier, trail runner, mountain biker. I'm finding these new muscles. Holy cow. And just learning about rhythm and timing. And then looking at your herd and seeing so many different kinds of horses and how they all had a role, just like the humans all had a role based on their abilities and their strengths and how they could help people. And to see you have Mustangs and quarter horses, and then the fancy horses, the Lusitanos, which I had never even heard of. I'm like, what's Lusitano? And seeing the different gifts that they had and how you were teaching quarter horses and Mustangs how to piaffe and passage. I was like, okay, I'm in 100%. It's really great.
You know, you're kind, and thank you for saying these nice things. What I need to say back to you is I realized as soon as you came out and began the work that you were one of those people who could see the whole constellation at the same time, which is quite rare. That our the autism piece, the brain piece, the horse training piece, the environment piece, the need to work with the whole family, not just with, one, if possible. And I remember thinking, I think this lady's going to go do it. Obviously, any of us autism parents are trained by our children. My biggest mentor, as everybody knows, is my son, Rowan. And obviously you're coming out of the same school, but nonetheless, not everybody decides to turn them upside down in this particular way. Tell us about Smiling Goat. Tell us about how you started, because Smiling Goat, just need to say for listeners, Smiling Goat Ranch in Colorado, you need to look it up. It's a gold standard place in terms of they know the neuroscience, they know the horse training, they know how to, if the kids are not into the horse, okay, we're going to mountain sports. Oh, you're not into mountain sports. No problem, we're going to the goat. Oh, you're not into goat. No problem, we're going to the water. Oh, you're actually into the wildflowers. No problem, there we are. This completely holistic approach that you guys have, it's very rare, but of course it's very effective. Can you tell us how Smiling Goat began, why the name Smiling Goat, and the evolution of this and where you're at? And spoiler alert that yes, internships are available and do take people at this amazing place in Colorado. So you might just want to think about that as you're listening to this while driving. So how does Smiling Goat come out of this?
Yeah. Well, after going through your trainings in 2013 and 2014, my new husband and I had just purchased a property that was mid-valley in the Roaring Fork Valley in this town of Carbondale. And it was right down the road from the Carbondale Rodeo Grounds, which is a public amenity to the town and is free to use. The property was 3 acres. And I remember thinking, my dad had a farm in Pennsylvania that was 200 acres. How many acres, Rupert, was your place in Elgin? I don't know, 50? 100?
Well, it grew. It started actually with just 7, but
Okay.
it grew to be about eventually 100. But I got to say that the core area was always about 5 to 7. You know,
Okay.
it only grew that big because, as you know, in Texas, sometimes it forgets to rain.
Mm.
For grazing purposes, we realized we had to rent and buy and scrabble
Right.
and grow and as much acreage as we could just to kind of rotate horses around. But yeah, the core area was small. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, 3.5 acres. I'm not going to be able to do anything here. I'll keep horses here and I'll do everything at the rodeo grounds. And I remember you coming to help us do our soft opening, and we did a demo at the rodeo grounds. And I had 3 quarter horses donated to us. So I literally had them for a week, and 2 of them came from a cattle ranch in Wyoming, Big Creek Ranch. Shout out to them. 2 of the best horses I think I've ever had. And one is still alive. Gates is still with us. So
Gates
Foundation
is an old school gentleman.
is, oh my gosh, he is my heart horse. And I'm quite sure he was my husband in a previous life. Like we are, and like you said, gentleman horse, so gracious with me, learning my in-hand work, doing shoulders in from the ground. And he would offer it. And I would be like, oh, I guess I'm doing something right here. But anyway, getting back to the property itself that had 0 animal infrastructure. So we built sheds, we built fencing, we ended up getting this lovely man, Brian Cole, shout out to you with Medallion Landscaping, who installed a creek hooked up to the irrigation ditches that all the ranchers use in Colorado. So we had running water. It ended up being this cute little nirvana on 3 acres. And I also lived there. And part of the horseboy karma magic also was in year 2 of Smiling Goat, we pitched there was a call for civic projects by a group called Roaring Fork Leadership, which is kind of like Shark Tank. It's a bunch of business people from all businesses that get randomly put into groups, and there's 5 groups, and they interview nonprofits and decide which one they want to take on for their civic project. And the property happened to have this cool little cabin on it. So I now have a blended family with 2 kids that are younger than my kids, and then my boys who are in high school. And the house is small, but the cabin was awesome. And the boys were like, yeah, we'll live here. And every man that walked into that cabin said, I'd move in here. It was just a cute long place with like 2 rooms and a bathroom. So we get picked by Roaring Fork Leadership, and they're going through their coursework, and they interviewed me for 2 hours. So I have Smiling Goat running for a year, and I'm doing it all myself with volunteers. So because I have kids in high school, I'm the newspaper teacher, I'm able to attract these volunteers, pony club girls, like everybody who wants to work with horses. And I'm still keeping my day job going. So I still have PR clients and I'm still juggling. So I'm basically working, I don't know, 7 days a week, 80 hours a week, but I'm loving it. Like Smiling Goat was not seemingly work to me. It was wonderful to wake up, have the animals there, be back to my farming roots with my dad, feeding animals. I'm loving it. And this leadership group looks at me and they said, Sheryl, you cannot sustain this. You are going to burn out. And our recommendation to you is building extra housing in your cabin to house interns. And I was like, wow, that is brilliant. So we had, I think on a parallel course, had approached University of Denver and their Human Animal Health Connection Institute. And they have a graduate student program for students.
Shout out to Nina Ekholm-Fry.
Exactly.
Lads, if you're listening to this, check out her podcast as well. She's a diamond.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, go on.
Yes. So we end up getting approved by DU, even though it's University of Denver. Their acronym is DU, not UD.
Oh, the one.
Right. But so, and we also had a working student program. So that, and we still have both of these, along with another one in certified recreation therapy, which is another story that came years later. But so DU started sending us interns, and they were mostly coming in the summer because we are a 3.5-hour drive from Denver. And so it was a bit of a commute for some students, but students that were looking for internship during their summer quarter, we were a really great fit for them. And my younger son, Mark, ends up going off to college, and James is still at home. And so the idea from this leadership group was your son can have his own suite, if you will, in the cabin that we build out for you. And he can have the college experience and have roommates living with him. And beautifully, with the horse boy karma, it's people who wanted to work with special needs. So they end up coming to live with us, taking an interest in James's obsessions, whether it's maps, movies, or rock music. Like, they would all connect with him. It was really, really beautiful. I think there are, and in this group were 3 construction people. Like, one was a high-end builder who built all the fancy homes in Aspen. The other one worked for the hospitality group of Aspen Skiing Company. And the third one worked for a builder that did like commercial construction. So I was like blessed with this amazing group. And then they have you come and do a final presentation, like all their teams. And they said, Sheryl, can you please bring animals? And I said, heck yeah, I would love to bring animals to this. So we brought our mini horses, and they did a grand entrance because I had never taken them inside before, and they jumped the threshold in a very grand way. So we got a standing ovation. It was a really, really cool thing. But it reminds me, you asked me, how do we get the name Smiling Goat? Before we actually launched the program, we had built the infrastructure for goats and rabbits. Basically building on your idea, Rupert, of having the small social animals around as part of the program. So I thought, okay, we'll start small with this before we bring in horses. And this lady was moving back east, and she had 3 goats. She was an empty nester, and she and her husband had the most adorable, sweetest goats. So we get these 3 goats that are massively overweight, Nellie, Lester, and Hubert. And they are as sweet as pie. And the boys and I are sitting around our kitchen table brainstorming. We also had 2 dogs that were black, and they were obsessed with the dogs. And they said, why don't we name it Black Dog Ranch? And so I'm like, let's Google it. I swear to you, I think there were 10,000 worldwide black dog ranches. I'm like, we can't do that. I'm in marketing PR. We need a good name. And Lester, the one goat, they're pygmy goats. Oh my God, Lester and Nellie were the biggest characters. And Lester had a little quirk where he almost smiled. And that's how we got the name, was Lester. And believe it or not, Lester is still with us. I honestly thought last winter was going to be his last winter because our winters are pretty significant here. The beautiful thing about the Roaring Fork Valley, though, is everybody's skiers and kids love snow days because school's out and their parents will drive them to the ski areas. So the world really doesn't stop in the winter here. We get beautiful snow and then great sunny days the next day. It's not endless gray. So anyway, but winters can be cold and harsh, and I was really concerned Lester was not going to make it. So we started incorporating more of Lester's lunchtime, is what we call it. And Lester's lunchtime is where our kiddos and young adults feed him lunch. And we have a brain injury lady, Miss Kara, who is an adult. And this is her favorite thing to do, is come to the ranch and feed Lester lunch. Lester has never looked better in his entire life. His coat, his weight, I'm like, okay, I don't know how much longer we have Lester, but I think when the animals feel purpose, it's just like humans. Their lifespan lasts longer.
Mm.
So that's how we got the name Smiling Goat. Yeah. And then, so I did not hire an employee for Smiling Goat until 2020. And again, I always say it really, like, life has worked out so perfectly that I had all these years of being and still being a PR person. During COVID, I get this email from a woman, completely cold outreach, that says, I'm a certified recreation therapist. I'm working for a local recovery organization. And they brought me here from Washington, and they now have found they don't have enough hours, wondering if you do. And at the same time, on the Horseboy International chat, and I think it might have been Rupert Isaacson sent out, is anybody a certified recreation therapist? And I think I chimed in something like, no, but I have one that wants a job. What's up? And it turns out in certified recreation therapy, you have to be supervised by another certified recreation therapist. So I can't supervise a college student who's interning as a rec therapist. It's a very strict licensure process with rec therapy. So what ended up happening was the intern that had contacted Rupert was a trick rider with equestrian chaos out of Alabama. And this young lady, Kaylee, was already through college and had horse skills. She wasn't just a rec therapist. And so I was like, okay, universe, am I supposed to be listening to this? Is it time for me to get an employee? And I ended up going out to 4 donors and said, hey, I have this opportunity for a 2-for-1. If we fund this salary, I not only get this rec therapy person, we get a therapist on our team, which we really needed. She has horse skills, and we get this intern who we'll have for 15 weeks, who also has horse skills. And they all said yes. And we have never looked back. Like, I lost sleep at night worrying that I would not be able to continue to fund that salary. And it has just worked out like a dream. Again, the horseboy karma magic. And so we had Brooke here for 15 weeks. And Brooke taught us mounted archery. And oh my heavens, so that's an addition to our program. And we can actually long line kiddos that don't have riding skills, and the horses understand what we are trying to do. And they, I swear to you, help line up the kids so they can hit the target. It's priceless. And so we're also going to build this piece out further for our veteran program and doing archery from the ground and then graduating them to archery from the back of the horse. And this is where your old schoolmaster horses really come in handy. They get it, and they end up helping the people, which I never understood that concept. I remember, Rupert, you saying to me when you were first teaching me dressage, is that with all the repetitions, the more you do it, your horses will then become so good that they will help you teach new people how to do it. And I remember thinking, is that really possible? Am I, Sheryl Barto, really capable of this? Will this happen? And then Gates, our gentleman horse, was the first one to do that. And I had a DU student who actually had a little bit of dressage, and it was amazing to watch how that all took off. Really amazing. And I also remember the other piece of advice you gave me was, don't worry, the good horses will come. I really thought that that was going to be such a hard piece. And boy, it really has not. And the horses we have are so incredible. We have 6 of them, and they all bring such different talents and gifts to the program. And I just pitch myself on like how wonderful they are in teaching other people and how kind they are with understanding what their jobs are, the professionals that they are.
You know, you've hinted at the variety, the broad breadth, that's the word, of the work you guys are doing there, that you're incorporating rec therapy, that it's clearly obviously not just about the horses. You have the social animals that you are involved in outreach with schools, that you also go into mountain sports, but the horse side of it, you are as obsessive as you need to be to create these wonderful horses. And at the same time, you're willing to abandon the horse in a heartbeat if that's not where the kid is at. And it's so interesting that, your average therapeutic riding place would not call itself after a goat,
Right.
or your average dressage place, because you guys are practicing a lot of dressage, would not call itself after a goat. And what I love about that is that really projects a humility that says to a child or a family coming in, this is not the horse place. And therefore, if you're intimidated or scared or not interested in the horse or whatever, therefore this is somehow not for you. Or if you're the person who's interested in the horse training side of the dressage, that, well, this is the dressage, very important and serious. No. I mean, it's called Smiling Goat. There's something that's so democratizing about that, and that roots it in nature. There's also, of course, a whole other set of skills, and I think it would really benefit listeners if you could go into this. So a lot of people now, obviously, the equine assisted world is a growing field. When I got into it, when you got into it, it was much more fringe. Governments were not getting behind it outside of, certain countries. Now that's changed, particularly since COVID. Suddenly now we have found ourselves drawn from the hippie margins, somewhat into the mainstream. And this is a good thing. So a lot of people now are starting equine assisted practices. And of course, as soon as they do this, they run into the challenge of, how do I not burn out? How do I fund it? Okay, maybe the government will pay for the kids to come, which of course they didn't when you and I began, but that's still not enough to, keep the whole place running. What are your thoughts on the following? How do you not burn out? You're an autism mum. You still have your day job. you're running the ranch, you're dealing with a very large number of families coming in, needing a real broad range of services, not just the horses. How do you not burn out? And then the second part of the question is, as a PR person, that's your parallel profession. What are the 5 tips that you would give people who are running programs going, shit, how do I actually sustain this? What are those? So let's start with the burnout one. How do you not burn out?
That is such a great question. And I know in the rec therapy field, and I think in most therapy fields, the whole concept of self-care is top of mind. And this generation coming up behind us is way more aware, I feel like, than our generation. I think I'm considered right on the last year of the baby boomer. And certainly I was raised with that mindset of do whatever it takes to get the job done. And so it's my PR company is called O Communications. It's the letter O, and it stands for ostrich, which is my maiden name, which I hated growing up. But my father was a past president of the American Veterinary Association, and he was Dr. Ostrich. Yes, I kid you not. But his name was very recognizable, and he was a first generation college student, immigrants of Russian Jews. And his brothers and sisters are all small business owners. Every one of them from lawyer, interior design, construction company, and a very driven group. So I feel like some of it is in my DNA. And I will say that yoga is really like one of my self-care things. Like I try to practice 3 times a week but I can only do early morning classes. And it seems like where we live in the Roaring Fork Valley, the earliest class is 7 a.m. And sometimes I've already been up for 3 hours and I've jammed on a bunch of things because I have to get it done. The other piece I would say is, to me, doing the horse training is not work. And being with the horses is also very, very therapeutic for me. And I think, some people just think I'm a little crazy because of the different hats that I wear. And, I sleep hard every night, 7 hours. And they say sleep is also one of those rejuvenation things we need. That's how Mother Nature made us. And I do spend a lot of time in nature. Our society now is so technology focused, and being on social media, I'm forced into it because of PR. But at the same time, social media has served Smiling Goat really, really well. And so I feel like my life is so interconnected that there's not really separation of church and state. But I also think, because I'm so passionate about Smiling Goat, I will do anything to advance whatever the goals are. And to me, it's what drives me. It's what lights me up. It's not oh God, I have to go do this. Also, learning to delegate and letting go. The other piece, I think, when I was that little girl POA person, nobody could touch my horse. It's my horse. It's my horse, and only I can make this horse canter. And where did I hear a quote that, what good is my horse if another person can't ride it? Right? So it's letting go and trusting your tribe. trusting, treating them to a point where you are confident in the decisions that they're going to make and not second guess their decisions. And so, like last week, um, Sunday, just this past Sunday, I had to drive 3.5 hours to Denver to pick up a calf hutch for my goats in our new location. So, for those of you who aren't ranchers, a calf hutch is like a gigantic doghouse. And we needed something for our goats for the winter. And I have a pickup truck and I needed to drive to pick this thing up. And one of my volunteers had texted me and said, "Hey, we were talking about Gates, our gentleman horse. He had 3 weeks ago, poor guy, cellulitis in one leg and an abscess in the other leg, both back legs. So literally, like I have pictures of him soaking one leg, icing the other leg. And honestly, this is where that term, it takes a village, comes into play. Like, yes, I'm doing some of it. But yes, when people offer to help, I'm accepting it. And so on Sunday, one of the volunteers said, so Gates is now at hand walking status. She's like, can I also hand walk the donkeys with him? So we have 2 mini donkeys that were donated last year. And so she brought her daughter, the daughter's boyfriend, and her, and she's from Sweden and lives in our valley and works for one of my real estate clients. And they sent me these beautiful photos of them hand walking Gates and the donkeys while I'm picking up the calf hutch. And then a third group was going to the other location where 2 other horses are, where that horse, Petey, who you have met, Rupert, he's my master fancy and illusion 4th level dressage horse that, yes, was donated to the program and is an amazing animal. He had scraped his legs and needed dressings. So I'm driving to Denver. I get photos from Newcastle, photos from Basalt, and everybody's being taken care of. So does that answer the question? I don't know. It's like, it's also,
I think you've also just let slip there that you now have 2 campuses.
yes, I did like that.
Not only are you not burning out, but you're growing.
But we're growing. And yes, I'm divorced a second time, which I think the passion of me working so much is it contributed to that, but that's okay. It's again the horseboy karma of the things that are opening up, like not imagining that these 2 campuses were possible and how they are. So we now have a mobile unit that will go to Carbondale and Snowmass. And we've been working with the town of Snowmass. And for people who are not skiers,
Oh, does that mean 3 campuses, 1 mobile?
Not really, because the animals are not living in Snowmass. It's a mobile unit going to deliver services there.
That sounds like 3 campuses, 1 mobile.
Doesn't it? Okay. Well, the town of
yeah,
it's a sister ski area to Aspen. So your ticket is good at Aspen and at Snowmass. And Snowmass is the 2nd largest ski area in the U.S. next to Vail. It's amazing. And the town has a rodeo ground. And the rodeo is very bouge. It's like all the people from Aspen come in their cowboy hats, and the rodeo grounds are used. I think there's 11 rodeos in the summer before winter hits. And the town did this amazing event this fall called the Main Event, MANE, and they showcased different horse disciplines and Smiling Goat. And so we got to do a back riding demonstration and a classical dressage demo. And then they asked me, do you have other disciplines? So I brought in a reiner to do reining and sliding stops and reining patterns. And then they hired a Mexican rodeo group that was the women's side saddle rider.
Oh, yeah, the Amazonian. Oh,
Gosh, the whole thing, the spirit.
I'm
And
not sure if they're correct.
they asked me, we brought in an equine massage therapist who set up a booth on the grounds. My blacksmith came in with his dogs and did demonstrations on horse foot care, and he did it with my mini donkeys. And I have to tell you, I haven't talked about Dakota, who you have also met, Rupert, who is a PMU horse that was donated to us. And this horse,
Listeners won't necessarily know what a PMU horse is. What's a PMU horse?
oh, their so their moms were bred for their urine to go into menopausal women's drug called Premarin. So they basically would keep the mares bred all the time so that they could harvest their urine. So the babies would drop and become hand-fed babies and either discarded or put up for adoption. And a woman from Aspen, I don't know what year it was, rescued 50 of these mares from one of those factories. And again, another universe sending me good things. I had the 3 quarter horses to start my program. We were growing. I was like, I need 3 more, but I don't want to just like take anything. And I put quietly the word out. And a woman who has a horse rehab program in Grand Junction said, oh my gosh, call so-and-so. She has cancer and needs to get rid of 6 horses. So I went up with my veterinarian and my first working student, Lily, and we looked at these 6 horses. And they wanted me to take all 6, but I didn't have room for all 6. So we took 3. And Dakota, Prince, and Leia. And Dakota, I need to do a DNA on him. There's some kind of draft because PMUs, they pick the big horses so that they could harvest more urine. And Dakota has some kind of draft in him, but also something else. He's the most graceful, incredible dressage horse. But he has that draft horse, steady Eddie as they go mentality. We taught him how to pull a cart during COVID. And I mean, he does sensory work, he does back riding. You can do anything with this horse. He does not like to be a leader on the trail rides, though. He does not like going through water obstacles. But anyway, back to the main event. They asked us to do a back riding demo. And I asked Kaylee, our rec therapist, I said, will you do the back riding while I narrate? So we show up with our pool noodles. And what I didn't realize, like I thought there'd be, a mixed age group to play tag, to show the game of tag. And now we teach kiddos on the spectrum the concepts of tag. So we had Kaylee back ride with a young girl who was neurotypical because she really, really, really wanted to do this. So we said, okay, Mela, you can be our back riding kiddo. We'll give you a pool noodle. Well, my team had brought all of our pool noodles. And you can imagine at a public event where there are 300 people, there are lots of children. We had 8 kids in the arena, all with pool noodles, playing tag with Dakota while I'm narrating. And I'm telling the audience who is they don't know horses, like, you do not realize how spectacular this is. There are 8 kids running at Dakota with pool noodles, tagging him. And Kaylee's doing walk to canter transitions absolutely beautifully. I need to send you the videos. They're spectacular. And I was so proud of our horse and him doing this so gracefully, so kindly, and so, like, there wasn't one moment that he balked, bucked, or spooked. And that says a lot. There's music playing. We've got an announcer system. 300 people watching. Like, it was pretty special. And then Petey and I got to do the classical dressage. I was living my best life. Like, he's doing passage and Spanish walk and flying lead changes. And I was like, who knew that at this later point in my life that this would be happening? It was pretty special. Yeah. And we just got to promote Smiling Goat.
And happening, these dreams coming true because of autism, not in spite of them, because of your son's autism.
Absolutely.
The person who really opened the door.
There is no question. And so many people ask me, does your son participate in the program? And I always pause and take a breath and say, well, not as you might expect, but there are ways that he has. And it's been so interesting, again, going back to your advice and Dr. Temple Grandin's advice of follow the child, follow the person. James never wanted to be identified as having autism. And to this day, he does not tell people that when he meets them. His obsessions growing up were cars and trucks. So as a 4-year-old, he could tell you every make and model on a road trip, that what was going by you, from cars to semis to whatever it was. And taking a page from the horseboy method is, let's figure out how we're going to turn an obsession into a vocation. How do we do that? And our first autism families, I don't know if you'll remember this, Rupert, but they came to the demo at the rodeo grounds. Little Miss Mia and her parents, Maribel and Diego, Latino family, bilingual. Diego, very into cars and trucks and worked at a body shop. And James would come out whenever that family was on the property and start talking with Diego. And I was like, okay, this is cool. Then we had 2 different families, Latino boys who were obese, 9-year-olds that weighed 150 pounds. I couldn't get them on the horse myself. So I would say to James, hey, Carlos is coming today. Will you just help me get him on Dakota? And of course, Dakota was trained to stand next to, we have a giant homemade mounting block that's more like a platform, like a diving board platform. James would come out and help me. And so there were little ways where he participated. And then one time I was out of town and there was a storm, and Adobe, our other quarter horse, who's only 14.2, jumped the fence, spooked in the storm. So she was out. James called me, said Adobe's out, and Adobe's a mare. She's beautiful. Loves James, like has always loved him. Like just, so he would often help me halter horses, move pastures, help with turnout. And when she got out, I told him, go get Gates, go to her with Gates, and I bet she'll come to you. And he did. And he got her. And he was so empowered that he did this without any help. And that if I was there, I would have done the whole thing. So yes, he has participated, but has been in a very ancillary way. And just to add, I'm so proud of him. He just celebrated 7 years with FedEx as a van driver. He has been a driver. He goes in 45 minutes early every day for 7 years because he doesn't like how the package handlers arrange his truck. And I said, why don't you just tell them how you want it? He said, no, it's way easier if I just go in and do it myself. So for 7 years, that's what he's done. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, obviously, where is that now? That's wonderful. And it's so interesting too how we live in a day and age where really only white collar jobs are valued. And as you know, we were just doing a neuroscience conference with Dr. Temple Grandin down at Eastern Virginia Medical School. And one of the points she was making is this doesn't prepare anyone for any kind of life. I mean, you might end up in some sort of white collar job at some point in your life, but if you don't know how to, the real jobs, what kind of skills can you build? But now people have been sold a kind of bill of goods, particularly more and more with social media, that, you've got to live a certain kind of lifestyle and blah, 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 blah. One of the gifts, as you said, of autism is that's not a thing. That kind of judging yourself by others, rowing the same. But I think back to myself, coming out of college, I didn't have a job that was not a manual job, whether it was construction or horse training or window cleaning or whatever I needed to do to keep body and soul together so that I could become a writer. I worked only manually for, I'd say, almost 10 years. And then little by little, I began publishing things and so on. And it gave me, well, all the things you expect it to give me. Of course, James is lucky he's coming out of the ranching background, and who knows where he'll end up. But the skills involved in being a FedEx driver, that's huge, 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 huge. The responsibility is massive. The just killing people on the road, let alone, all of the logistics involved.
I'm so proud of him. If he has to take care of that truck, he has the perfect amount of human interaction. It's not too much. Sometimes it's none at all. Sometimes and he's got animal buddies on his route. So he tells me about the calico cat, and he'll send me selfies of the cat on his shoulder because it jumped in his truck. And he's got other dogs that he knows and all their breeds and all their, he's connected with the pet shop owner that's next to Walmart. And it's been perfect for him. He also says he wants to start his own business someday. So maybe he will. He thinks he wants to be a tow truck driver. And I said, well, maybe you should ride around with one for a while and see. He originally wanted to be a long haul trucker. And after life skills school, his after school care person was married to a truck driver. So I said, hey, Deb, do you think Chris would let James go with him? She's like, absolutely. So James went on this adventure with him. And when he came back, he's like, oh, I didn't realize how much work it's not just driving. They have to load, they have to unload, they have to show up at 4 a.m. at places. It really opened his eyes. And I think, I said, you probably should do that with a tow truck driver too. I have no idea what it's like to be a tow truck driver, but I'm guessing I've called to be rescued a few times. And I'm imagining
them calls.
There's a lot of problem solving that goes on with that. So
the fact that he's even able to do that. And speaking of other problem solvers, you haven't really spoken about Mark, your other son. But and then I want to bring you back to that second part of my question, which is, as a PR person, what is your advice to people who are starting? But just tell us a little bit about Mark, because that's
Mark,
and how he's been involved in
yes.
How this is sort of a tribal thing that you do.
It really is. So Mark, 20 months younger than James, neurotypical, played varsity sports, football, baseball, wrestling, all through high school, hockey, went on to college, went into ROTC, which...
ROTC is for We Brits.
Yes. Reserve Officer Training Corps, I think is the C. I might be wrong on that, but it is for college students who want to enter the military as officers. So he went into the Air Force ROTC and graduated as a second lieutenant, and now he is a captain, and he's in special ops, which the Air Force, speaking of PR, really does not toot their horn about their special ops team. but they are very alive and well. And he just got married to another fellow ROTC captain, and she is a pilot, and she flies C-130s. And I think
What are those?
they are cargo planes, and she does search and rescue. So in theory, she could be rescuing Mark's unit if they got into trouble. Like it's kind of crazy. And they just got married October 10th.
Yeah.
I'm like over the moon. She is an amazing human. Her first weekend visiting with us, she volunteered. She got out there and helped me do sensory work with a family. Like, she's an amazing human. They both are. And I think for Mark, being the younger son of having a special needs older brother almost moves you into the older child's position in the family.
Mm.
And Mark is a very stoic human with an enormous heart and doesn't show a lot of emotions. And Ella, his wife, which is so fun to say, his wife, she brings out the absolute best in him, and she is super outgoing and very, very driven. She is studying for her master's while she's getting all her hours in for flight school. They both are stationed now in Tucson. He just got transferred to Tucson. And Mark he's a really deep, deep thinker. And I really believe that growing up with a special needs brother, I don't think I realized the level of compassion Mark has because of that experience. And I'm so incredibly proud of both of them. I could cry.
It would be interesting to see, as you know, down in Colorado Springs, Horsepoint, our other method Tequine, which we work with veterans, is actually there on the US Air Force Academy grounds working with veterans. And I can't help wondering if they'll end up somehow connected with
I
that.
know. I wonder that too. Who knows?
But let's go back just quickly. Where I'm going with this is I think a lot of people listening would probably quite like some mentorship from you, because so as a PR person, you've had this parallel track with the equine assisted work. What are your like checklist things that you would say to someone who's going to go into this or is in this and is wondering how to build it further, or is wondering, okay, I've been kind of doing this myself. How do I now get funded? Like, you've addressed and faced all these things single-handed.
Yeah.
Something about PR. What's your advice to us?
Okay, that's such a great question. I think one is philosophical, and it's saying yes. And it's saying yes to networking opportunities. And that's anything from having a coffee with somebody to going to an event and tabling at an event. And the reason I say that is you just never know where that is going to lead you. And yes, some can be time wasters, but if you ask the right questions and ask for names and follow up and meet with people, it's just amazing what doors start opening. Honestly, with Smiling Goat, it is almost impossible to run into somebody who's not affected by autism or has a veteran in their life, or somebody who is in recovery or affected by trauma. Like, we're humans, and this is what connects us all. And the other big piece of advice is taking names and keeping track of them and having lists. And this is where it's easy to let that slip. And here's an example. Was it 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? The Arc of the Central Rockies did something similar to that Virginia medical conference you were at, not quite at that level, but they basically invited pediatricians from Denver to Grand Junction to come for a medical conference talking about neurodiversity. And they asked us, Smiling Goat, along with several other therapeutic services so Asyndigo was there, for example, the other autism group. And they asked us to be there for the lunch hour where the doctors could come out, go around the tables and understand what resources they could refer their patients to. And so I think I got 11 names from that. I would engage in conversation with people, and then, 2 of them were doctors from Children's Hospital in Denver. And I said to one of them, do you remember so-and-so? He used to work in your unit. He was a special needs dad, a nurse practitioner who moved out of town. And he said to me, Sheryl, I would like to figure out a way where we can diagnose kids in a ranch setting rather than in an office. And how much nicer, right, would that be than having kids having to go into the scary doctor office? It's freaking brilliant, right?
The message that says to the family, it's like, ooh, your autism diagnosis might get you this life.
Right.
Rather than amazing. Yeah, that is brilliant. That is brilliant.
So this man moved away. I said to this doctor, I don't know if you remember John so-and-so. She's like, I do. Because he had adopted 2 kids, I think, from the Dominican Republic that were both special needs. He drove them from Denver to come to Smiling Goat. That's 3.5 hours. He brought them 3 times. And that idea died when he left. And I said to this doctor, so I have her name. I never go anywhere with this so old school notebook, but my little spiral ring notebook, I had every one of those doctors and nurse practitioners write their email addresses down. So I will be following up and saying, hey, so great to meet you. So that's the other thing, is follow through is another tip. It's like, if you have to make notes to yourself to follow up, so I have this 11 people. So for me, being in PR, plugging in 11 emails is not a big deal. But for some people, that could be a project. So creating like some kind of either an Excel spreadsheet or a MailChimp database where you're storing these names so you can segment your list. Here are your doctors. Here are your volunteers. Here are your donors. And it's knowing, like, I am a little obsessive about my lists, but I really believe it pays off. The other tip is the news media that are in your marketplace. Make friends with them, invite them to see your organization in action. I guarantee you'll get a story, and that's free publicity, and it's not hard.
It's so true. It's funny, as a journalist myself, one of the things that, people often, when you suggest this, people say, oh, but, why would they be interested in me? It's like, because they need stories.
Yeah,
they are constantly looking for content, and desperately need it. So you are actually doing them a favor by showing them your cool thing that you're doing. Never think that you're not worth looking at. Quite the opposite. Yeah. But we make gods of the media, don't we? So I think a lot of people are quite intimidated to approach.
For sure.
This way for them to approach their local TV, radio, whatever.
Yeah, which can also, it's called tenacity. Keep on trying. So, like, TV stations love visuals. And so if you And also, if you can do a little research on the anchors, like are any former horse people or rodeo queens, like 9 News in Denver. Kathy Sabin was a rodeo queen. I wrote her. She didn't answer me. It's okay. I planted a seed. Maybe someday she will. Our local media, and here's what I mean by not saying no to things. We were asked to table at a volunteer fair for the local public radio station in Aspen. I was like, yes, of course. So we go up, we take a goat with us, we're at the booth. And so I have a very simple marketing booth. It doesn't even need to cost money. It's a table with a tablecloth. We have a brochure, and I literally, we print out sign-up sheets, like, give me your email. What's your interest? Would you like to be on our mailing list? Would you like to be a volunteer? And you engage in conversation with people. Well, guess what? One of their arts and culture reporters was walking around. She came up to us and said, I've never heard of you guys. I'd love to come down and do a story. So she came down and did an NPR style story where we had a family that said it was okay for her to be there. She's interviewing mom and dad. She's interviewing the child. She's interviewing Kaylee about being a rec therapist. I mean, I could not have dreamed of a better piece. And it was right before one of our fundraisers. It was brilliant. The other tactic I will sometimes use, especially so newspapers, radio stations, everybody's changed since COVID. They are short-staffed, and sometimes they don't have time to come see your place. So we were part of Horses for Mental Health Month last May. And I wanted to kick off the month, of course, with this big media splash. So I typed up a news release. And the news release was like the perfect story of what I wanted to see published. In Aspen, believe it or not, we still have 2 printed newspapers that are free, and everybody reads them. And we landed on the front page with a photo that I supplied, kicking off Horses for Mental Health Month on one of them. And then the other one, because they're competitors, took a different angle. But we had already had a relationship with both papers. So that's also part of don't think of it as once and done, but think of it as building a relationship. And I swear, you bring a person onto your property and they meet your animals, they'll fall madly in love. And we put them through the horse boy sensory work. Try this, see how you feel, see how this makes you feel. It's well worth your time. So those would be my main tips to get you started. We do a lot of grant writing, and it's with our local municipalities. So that would be the local cities and towns, and then the counties. They all have health and human services grants. And they are very generous if you put together the right story about your funding needs. And so we have been funded by 2 counties in our valley and 3 towns consistently for 9 years. So
I so agree with that. And one of the things I think one could add to that is when you're going out for the grant writing, do you not agree? The winning wicket is not to say, if you give me money, I'll do this thing. You have to actually put your ass up and say that we are already doing this thing, and actually you have to be.
Yes.
But we'd like to do it better.
Yes.
So you have to take that risk of first self-funding it or funding it, bootstrapping it however you can. But I've seen this definitely work for Smiling Goat and for so many others, that when you put that there, that sends a very strong message to any funder saying, well, they're not waiting for us. They're already doing it. Why wouldn't we bet on them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. So
you got to white knuckle it a bit first.
You do. You do. Yes. There's definitely blood, sweat, and tears involved, but it's so worth it. It's so worth it. And I think that this field of animal assisted therapy is doing nothing but grow. And, I look at that whole field and I think, where was that when I was going to college? Because it didn't even exist then. And now it's a thing. It's
It is,
amazing.
it is, it is. And of course, now it's the thing that young people want to go into. And of course, to do this work meaningfully, you need some life skills and some life experience. This is difficult, of course, when you're just coming out of college. And that's where people need somebody like you, a mentor, to help them find their way. And that was actually going to be, we're sort of heading now past the 2 hour mark. And I know you have to go. One of the things I wanted to ask you before I let you go is, can people contact you for mentoring? Because you've really shown what can be done when you have to hold down a job. Okay, some of the time that you've been doing this, you've had partner. Sometimes you haven't. Sometimes you've been single
Yeah.
mum. Also you're a special needs mum. You've had to hold down multiple careers at the same time, but you made a real go of it, and you are, without a doubt, we've seen at the cutting edge of this work in the Western states. There's you, there's obviously Joelle Dunlap out at Square Peg, and some others, but there's people who really stand out as the gold standard. You are definitely up there. And how to integrate these other worlds of therapy, rec therapy, and so on, into the horse training side, the funder. Can people come and train with you? Can people reach out to you for consultancy? Can people allow Sheryl Barto to mentor them? Because I, as you say, this is a growing field, and I meet so many young people now who are wanting to go into this, but they're lost. They don't quite know how. Or for people that are running their show, but are wondering, they're a little bit stuck. How do they get to the next? What can you do things for them? How do they contact you? Can you mentor them? I'll shut up and let you answer now.
Absolutely. And I would love to. So I can be contacted at Sheryl at smilinggoatranch.com. And Sheryl is with an S, Sheryl. I also have a kind of an offshoot to O Communications called Whoa Communications. How perfect is that? Right? And I even have a unicorn in my logo because I just couldn't help myself. But really, it's just designed for that. So whether you're somebody who already has a program and wants an extra set of eyes or advice, mentorship in like the horse piece or the running the nonprofit piece or running the business piece, I am here to help. I would love to. On the Smiling Goat side, we do have an internship program and a working student program. And with the
Go to
internship,
Colorado.
you go, yes. You go to Colorado and hang out with us, and we are year round. So if you're a skier and a horse person, we are nirvana because you can do it all. If you're not a skier, it doesn't matter. You probably don't want to be here in the winter, but there's so much recreation activity. People come from all over the world. We have gold medal fly fishing waters. We have the skiing, the mountain biking, the hiking. We're surrounded by Colorado's 14ers. It is very, very beautiful here, really. So with the internship program that's really driven by the universities themselves. So we have agreements right now with 7 different universities nationwide for either social work or recreation therapy. And then the working student program can really be anybody who wants to focus more on the horse side of things, but also still helps deliver sessions to our kiddos and our veterans. And they can be designed based on your needs and your timeframes. We've had a handful of gap year kids. So that works. It could even be post-college if if somebody wanted to do that. I'm always willing to look at anything and see if it's a good fit. So
Brilliant. Okay, so they give us again how they contact you and tell us what your website is.
Oh, okay. I've got two websites, smilinggoatranch.com and wowcommunications.net. And my emails are both of those, Sheryl@smilinggoatranch.com or Sheryl@wowcommunications.net.
Fantastic. And we will, of course, put these in the after bits so that people can find them.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, Sheryl, you're an inspiration. You're also a massive and very necessary resource. Before we go, where do you want the future of this equine assisted world to go?
Wow. Oh, I would just love to see it grow and grow and grow. And for everyone who needs therapy to have access to it without cost being a barrier. So if I could, as I am gaining this experience and moving through life, if I could help others start centers in their locations, it would feel like I am just expanding the services that we started here, that we started through the whole horseboy method. And I would love to see it go all over the world, which I feel like you have started that already.
Where I'm with you is this thing of let costs not be a barrier.
Yes.
And I think we're all collectively working on that. You know, the Irish government has just come in backing certain equine assisted things.
Yeah.
It's happening. It's beginning to happen. Germany's there. The Scandinavian countries are there. But we need more. And I think particularly in the USA, post-COVID now, you know, as you said, there are many more grants out there than there used to be around mental health. Oh, and by the way, the Horses for Mental Health Week or month that you referred to, also for people looking for mentorship, do check out our previous podcast with Lynn Thomas, who runs that. If you are running a program and you need some help with your PR, that's exactly what the Horses for Mental Health thing is there to do. And it's there to help you get your story out. So do check out the Lynn Thomas thing, because this happens every year. Listen to what she has to say on that podcast and profit from it. But
absolutely. They provided so many resources. Last year was our first year. We will absolutely do it again. I learned a lot. It was really amazing.
I can't wait to, it's been a long time since I came out to the Roaring Fork Valley. I'd love to come and see it all again.
Yes.
Sheryl, thank you so much for coming on, sharing with us.
Thanks for having me. I'm incredibly honored, really.
Leonard, why wouldn't we rush after you, begging you to come on this show? You know, and really, for listeners, do reach out to Sheryl. She is one of the people out there who really does know how to put these things together. If you are sitting there scratching your head, wondering what the next phase is going to be, allow her to mentor you, as she mentors a lot of people. If you can be even 1/100th as effective as Smiling Goat, you'll be on the right track.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. So until the next time, Sheryl.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Join our website, newtrailslearning.com, to check out our online courses and live workshops in Horseboy Method, Movement Method, and Athena. These evidence-based programs have helped children, veterans, and people dealing with trauma around the world. We also offer a horse training program and self-care program for riders on longridehome.com. These include easy-to-do online courses and tutorials that bring you and your horse joy. For an overview of all shows and programs, go to rupertisaacson.com. See you on the next show. And please remember to press subscribe and share.